The majority of adaptations of Spider-Man have played with the core details of Peter's beloved. I don't say this in a weirdo, anti-feminist, racist way like she needs to be a submissive and breedable Scandinavian with anime proportions, just that her character is adjusted to fit different careers, hobbies, existing relationships to Peter, and fashion sensibilities. I have no inherent issue with this kind of character adaptation. 80-year-old comic stories are messy, and reworking things for a coherent story or particular theme is sensible. But after pretty clear attempts by officially branded media to canonize MJ as Spidey's one true love, while also broadening the range of who she is as an individual, I have to wonder, what is it about a demonstrably iconic character that needs to be updated? What does this say about how company leadership views the title and the messages they want to convey to their audience? Well, thesis time. While it's more interesting to make MJ a more active participant in the story for new audiences, adapted media has increasingly stripped her of complexity to resemble a comfortable archetype. And rather than highlight her unique, non-traditional qualities, attempts to modernize her character have puritanical inflections, suggesting that a good, smart woman cannot be interested in fashion, confident in her body, or, heaven forbid, have her own flaws. Let's back up and talk publication history. Mary Jane M.J. Watson is the niece of Peter's neighbor and close friend of Aunt May, Anna Watson. Mary Jane is first mentioned by Anna and May with the intention of setting the nibblings up in Amazing Spider-Man number 15, which Peter is avoiding of for some time. MJ is given a full introduction in 1966 with Amazing issue number 42, where the surprise of her striking appearance is conveyed in this iconic panel, introducing her iconic refrain.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot.
She gets added to Peter's friend group shortly after, but is depicted as flirty, free-spirited, and kind of unserious. Stan Lee, still writer for the series at this point, was more interested in pursuing Gwen Stacy as the primary romantic interest, and not too much depth would be extracted from MJ during this period. That is, until the Jerry Conway run beginning in 1972, which, under the pen of a new 19-year-old author, would take more of an interest in teen relationship drama that placed more importance on Peter's burgeoning ESU friend group of Harry Osborn, Flash Thompson, Gwen Stacy, and Mary Jane. Eventually, Conway found that Pete and Gwen's relationship was reaching a point of stagnation, and thus wrote her infamous death at the hands of the Green Goblin. The Tom DeFalco run between 1984 to 87 would expand much further on MJ's backstory, revealing that she's known about Peter's superheroism since the beginning, before even meeting him, and sharing the troubled upbringing that informs so much of her character. Mary Jane was raised in a broken home, suffering abuse from her father and needing to support her family soon after her parents' divorce. Due to her father's alcoholism and financial difficulties, the Watsons would often move from place to place, and MJ and her older sister Gail would sometimes live with family members such as her Aunt Anna, who, like May to Peter, would come to be an important parental figure in her life. MJ's extroverted, free-flowing personality was a way to adjust to the frequent moves her family made, allowing her to easily make friends while skirting vulnerable exchanges. Though it did place a strain on her relationship to her sister, as she often came across as self-centered. The poor examples of her parents' marriage and her elder sister's loveless marriage at 19 stoked skepticism toward relationships, further fueling MJ's non-committal attitude. It also led her to an interest in performing arts, making her party girl persona a bit of a protective mask as well as a practiced character. She dreamed of acting as a teenager, but had to prioritize working when her mother fell ill. After her mother died, she left home to stay with her Aunt Anna, determined to realize her dreams. After Gwen's death and the final battle with the Green Goblin, Peter lashes out at Mary Jane, claiming she wouldn't care if her own mother died and telling her to leave. But rather than make herself scarce, MJ stays, closing the door and showing up for Peter despite his harsh words. The decision can be looked at as a turning point for the two characters, connecting them at a deeper level and peeling away MJ's flippant exterior. It exposed similarities between their upbringings and fears surrounding commitment, as well as the trauma bonds forged as half their college friends die. From there, a deep romantic chemistry wrote itself. More importantly, it constructed a side character with true complexity, her own personal baggage, and a distinct personality which readers uncovered over years of plotlines. Her and Peter were intertwined in a way no other love interest had been, and with her knowledge of his secret identity, she pushed beyond the tired cycle of Parker's double life blocking his happiness. Over the course of the next roughly 20 years, Peter and MJ's relationship would have its ups and downs, contrived by crazy plot developments or otherwise, but she would always remain a core romantic interest, with the pair marrying in Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 21. Of course, if you continue to follow Marvel Comics, you'll know that their marriage was undone in 2007 with the One More Day storyline, written by J. Michael Straczynski and artist for the miniseries as well as editor-in-chief of Marvel at the time, Joe Quesada. This was, of course, very upsetting to many fans, but served the purpose of de-aging Peter in a sense, allowing for the pursuit of other relationship options. Carly Cooper, Ms. Marvel, Silk, Mockingbird, Black Cat again. Mary Jane has not been wholly excluded from the Spider-Man mythos, having even been granted the superhero mantle of Jackpot, and most recently, bondage to the Venom symbiote, but Marvel's clearly not putting her back together with Pete anytime soon, and you're likely to see mention of the name Paul be a rage bait meme in any comics-related comment section. So, for those who don't read comics, they're weird. In the Big Two especially, timelines are frequently reset and retcons made out of necessity for an unending title featuring characters who, for the sake of the brand, simply cannot grow old and retire. Under these conditions, comic fans may sometimes feel entitled to certain outcomes or pairings, but the show must go on. And perhaps on the more optimistic side, writers are afforded the freedom to take the character in new directions. But what's perhaps most indicative of the core pillars of a character are the adapted media's representations. In the case of Spider-Man, no romantic interest is as frequently featured as Mary Jane, and even the media that have instead cast, say, Gwen Stacy, have included MJ in the cast with clear intention to expand her relationship to Peter. That's Kirsten Dunst in all three of the Sam Raimi directed films, Shailene Woodley in the scrap scenes and unmade sequel to the Amazing Spider-Man films, and Zendaya as the self-aware reinvention Michelle Jones Watson in the MCU trilogy. ABC's 1994 Spider-Man TV series, which covers a lot of comic book storylines, ends with and majorly features Mary Jane as Peter's relationship partner. Multiple short-lived series from the late 90s to 2000s included her as lead love interest, such as Spider-Man Unlimited, the new animated series, and the tragic victim of the MCU Sony deal, Spectacular Spider-Man, which was working toward a final arc that would bring her and Peter together. In most video games featuring an established Spider-Man, you can expect to see MJ, even in the current Sony exclusive title that works in Miles Morales, who was himself introduced post One More Day. Into the Spider-Verse has Peter Parker destined to be married to Mary Jane across multiple timelines, bringing the washed-up version of him back to her to have that child that never gets to live in mainstream canon. Yet, in some profound irony, Mary Jane rarely fits the same archetype as her comic book counterpart. As opposed to her inversion of the girl next door trope, she's instead made a bit more Girls Next Door Z. Modest, sweet, and working in a similar field as Peter. Meanwhile, Peter Parker largely remains the same. A nerdy orphan boy with a strong moral code, deep love for the family he has, and crippling guilt, who has great interest in science and a newspaper photography gig. And looking at major adaptations over the years, it seems that this erosion of MJ's singularity becomes ever more flattening and limiting in its depiction of appropriate women. Raimi's Spider-Man tweaks the details to make Mary Jane Peter's high school crush. This is an easy choice for the story that was to be told in these films, utilizing Spidey's then canon wife and most recognizable love interest before there was a mainstream understanding of the title. It was also likely influenced by the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, which began publication in 2000, updating the Spider-Man origin and cast of characters into a more streamlined modern setting. This version of MJ is a popular, pretty girl who retains her interest in theater and abusive home life, but not to disrespect the very 2000s costume design, doesn't seem particularly interested in fashion. She's also not super outgoing, sociable, nor does she have any personal hang-ups about commitment. This trilogy has the most attention paid to MJ's personal desires and struggles, depicting how she's stifled at home and chases success on the stage. Unfortunately, it doesn't fully resemble the complexity and personal traumas that comic book MJ has. We don't explore her family issues in greater detail, her desire for independence, her flirty veneer, her individuality. Instead, despite her centrality in all three movies, she's kind of the one waiting for Peter to let her in and doesn't change all that much herself. The Mark Webb directed films notably cast Gwen Stacy as lead love interest, but I think even that choice communicates something. The Amazing Spider-Man sought to distinguish itself from the Raimi films as sleeker, more modernized, and referencing deeper cuts of comic lore. There, Peter made web shooters. He was obnoxious when fighting crime. His parents were government agents. He was a popular loner with a skateboard. And his love interest was Gwen Stacy, which real comic fans could scoff at filthy casuals for assuming that Emma Stone was Mary Jane over. I do think their choice of love interest was purposeful in this way, as these films jumped right into a Death of the Stacy storyline, starting with the villain that Raimi was reportedly stopped from including, the Lizard, and placed a heavy emphasis on the romance between Peter and Gwen. But all the same, Gwen stands out more for her easy blank slate character. She's gotta be blonde with a headband and a police captain dad, but is otherwise free of essential traits. And when comparing her with Raimi MJ, it gives the impression that what's really desirable for a studio is that malleability. Now, as previously mentioned, the sequel had shot scenes with their own version of Mary Jane that didn't make it into the final cut, and the trilogy was discontinued before its finale.
Okay, I gotta tell you this one thing, and it's...
I've gotta return some videotapes.
Carrying forward into the MCU, the question of how to approach Spidey's love interest bounced off of these two representations. Will they do another MJ? Felicia Hardy this time? Maybe go really old school and throw in Betty Brant? Will she lean harder into comic book lore or depart from it entirely? This version of MJ is, like most of the MCU, kind of a punchline to mess with audience expectations. The first film in this series, Spider-Man Homecoming, returns us to a boyish high school Peter Parker. His origins skipped over, and the poverty that is so core to his drama circumvented in favor of letting top-billed character Tony Stark be his mentor. Nonetheless, Peter's an orphaned high schooler living with his aunt with a strong sense of responsibility, semi-recently acquired powers, and aptitude in sciences. His love interest is instead Liz Allen, a character who more closely resembled the Raimi film's depiction of Mary Jane, and serves as Peter's first conundrum of the hero lifestyle. It's only at the end of the film that we're given a winking introduction to this universe's MJ, disguised as the edgy, disaffected Michelle Jones Watson, played by Zendaya. This MJ exists to contradict audience expectations, notably changing the legal name of the character to indicate her difference from prior depictions. She's too cool to care, dressed down, and also into science, which could be cool, but sorry to say, is not explored whatsoever. The brewing of her and Peter's romance is skipped over entirely between films, fast-tracking the drama and having MJ find out Peter's Spider-Man in a sightseeing romp. She has no personal life, desires, troubles, or backstory to speak of. She is hardly a character, and is quickly given the one more day treatment just after cementing their relationship. The MCU is not known for its good writing, but I am sometimes wowed by how the high-profile real-life couple playing the pair didn't bleed into the films. After all, cast members are strongly highlighted in big-budget movies, not only for the gravitas that highly paid actors lend, or in the ability of a tentpole movie to build up a rising star, but also the parasocial role of press tours. And though Holland and Zendaya's relationship was not confirmed until after the second movie, dating rumors were certainly abound, much of which was inspired by their dual appearances promoting the movie. But the flip side of that emphasis on Zendaya and Tom Holland looking cute together is the implication that audiences are watching for the actors rather than the characters. It is enough that this MJ is Zendaya quipping her way through each scene. MJ will go wherever the movie needs her to be, and the tone remains so deeply unserious that real character analysis is a fool's errand, so long as two good-looking young people kiss on screen, but not so much that we have to expect explaining anything to our children. All is well. Into the Spider-Verse features Miles Morales as the protagonist, taking place in a clearly alternate version of the Spider-Man universe. However, this world's version of Peter is, of course, married to one Mary Jane, whose appearance lines up with the classic brand. the Peter who more closely resembles our 616 Spider-Man, is heartbroken over his divorce from another Mary Jane. As if it's a canon event that Peter Parker marries Mary Jane. Like, in every universe, they will find each other. And as this couple gets back together in the sequel and has that aforementioned Spider-Baby, even destined to be together, this Mary Jane is quite obviously a model actress with nice wavy hair. But she's also not a big part of the story, and one of the main draws of the Spider-Verse is its aesthetic uniqueness and the idea it presents that anybody can wear the mask. There are essential elements of the Peter Parker story, a necessary tragedy that begets every Spider-Man, woman, and child. But the most important thing is that Spider-Man is an idea, a former little guy who uses his power for the betterment of the world around him. I think the theme of these movies is really effective and conveys a strong positive message to young viewers, as indicated by the plethora of Miles Morales toddler teas. It also manages to both revere comic book lore while diving headfirst into the conversation around diverging from source material. And I ultimately like how Spider-Gwen overhauls the head-in-the-fridge legacy of Gwen Stacy. But it is still revealing of the emptiness of Gwen as a love interest that she has been so drastically reworked into an individual that young viewers can look up to.
How you gonna have a cartoon bunny hopping over the white girl in the cartoon? Lord have mercy.
Marvel's Spider-Man, released in 2018, developed by Insomniac Games, of such core PlayStation platformers as Ratchet & Clank and Spyro. It's a big-budget, open-world game that largely lived up to the hype behind its release and is warmly regarded for its presentation, as well as unique storyline drawing from comic book spider lore. In this incarnation, 60s spandex is replaced by armored suits, with a recurring emphasis on artificial appendages and robotics with military applications. It features an established Spider-Man already experienced with a great many of his rogues gallery, and the balancing act of the double life. A college degree holding early 20s Peter whose power set and background comply with the tradition. His powers are biological, save for his web shooters, he pursues a career in science, has and still occasionally does submit freelance photography, and has known MJ since his teens. He and Mary Jane already have a romantic history, but have broken up. This version of Mary Jane, however, casts her as an investigative journalist, naturally aligning her career ambitions with Peter's superheroism. Now in fairness, this version of Peter is himself quite a wholesome millennial-looking fellow, so this Mary Jane fits pretty easily into that category. Notice her outfit choices are a sort of autumnal business casual, simple earrings, pleather jackets, scarves, skinny jeans, not shitting on people who dress like this, but it doesn't really scream cutting-edge fashion. Nor does she really showcase a theatrical side in these games. I want to be clear that I'm not listening to whatever weird rant capital G gamers have for her design. She looks and acts like a real-life woman, and Insomniac MJ's given a lot more attention as a character than most adaptations. She actively contributes to the spider plot rather than being kept in the dark, even having the somewhat contentious gameplay sections. Drama between her and Peter is a big part of the story, and in the sequel her gripes with their relationship are made explicit, even if only for one mission. But still, this is a sanitized version of MJ. Her problems stem not from her family history nor personal traumas, but her editor and the feeling that she lives in Spidey's shadow. Real concerns, but recall that Mary Jane should maybe be able to relate to the loss of Aunt May, to Peter's financial struggles. She's cool-headed and sweet, rather than bouncy and irreverent. She has no rough edges, and I can't tell that she ever did. One More Day is not a uniquely devastating event. The dissolution of Parker's marriage was an inevitability of a never-ending story, and Quesada and Straczynski were not the first to propose the idea. Marvel wants kids to continually identify with the title that pioneered relatable comic book heroes, and to do that, he can't grow up too much. Yet still, their wedding is cemented in the mythology, her image itself being part of the draw of the series. And so Mary Jane Watson is too recognizable and well-liked to keep her away, whether that's a new licensed video game or mainline titles. This level of IP value invites a paradoxical need to both maintain a tried-and-true status quo and let more ships come to harbor. Contemporary Spider-Man comics have been trying to build MJ up beyond her connection to Spider-Man for some time now, which, yeah, let's do it. She's more than qualified to work for Stark Industries, and if she can manage superheroism at a professional level, why not give her a suit of her own sometimes? And if she can expand her sphere beyond Peter, why can't she be a mentor figure to other spider-related characters? And if she's applying lessons from her own inner turmoil to a new generation, why not throw her a symbiote to work it out through action? But then, why in more mainstream media is she a shell of that person? I'm not saying we need MJ to have impossible Liefeld proportions and sexy time panels, but this shrinking of female characters back down to a family-friendly paramour with no trauma responses or obstacles that don't revolve around the male protagonist sends a pretty clear message. A message that wives are to be beautiful in appearance, but chaste in behavior. That somehow the goodest boy neighborhood hero with a complicated life is going to innocently romance his high school sweetheart, and that her wants and needs should never challenge the nuclear family ideal. Even though Peter's a nerdy orphan raised by his elderly aunt, who was bullied for not fitting into conventional masculinity. But he probably wore a tie to his first day of college. A chaotic girl is the perfect match to teach him how to enjoy life for once. Gwen got axed because that girl next door shit is too 50s. This Disneyfication of the established lore conflicts with the progressive vision that made Spider-Man stand out in the first place. Like, sorry, but MJ dates other people. She likes to party, she dresses how she wants, she hides parts of herself, and she rubs some people the wrong way. And, I mean, what about her swag? Frankly, I'm a little old to be concerned about who they have Peter come home to in issue number 5000. What I am concerned with is the message that's conveyed to kids and teens by the archetypes these characters are reduced to. Just like how I enjoy Spider-Gwen revising a nothing character who dies for drama, I want to see Mary Jane represented as an actual person who doesn't neatly slot into Parker's life. She should have her own stuff going on, maybe not be so ready for Pete to turn to whenever he feels like it's time to settle down. Can't an 18-year-old girl be a little exploratory, a little wild, a little selfish? If we're already past the point of it having to be Mary Jane on screen, why twist her character in so many ways? I mean, how is it that real-life couple Tom Holland and Zendaya are depicted in popular culture as a sweet, handsome dork and a generational beauty queen, while their on-screen counterparts lack any sort of flavor? Why must Kirsten Dunst run out of the wedding chapel and never speak of her family again? 50 extra spider costumes, and we can't get a little drip from Miss Watson? Take my girl thrifting. Mary Jane Watson is a cool character, not because she physically kicks ass or because she's a slim, thick Aryan. She's cool because she has dementia, personal problems, and I know this is kind of harder to write because she's so vital to Spider-Man without necessarily being a direct combatant. She's a hot girl with great style who still has compassion and intellect. She compliments Peter by having a contrasting exterior, but ultimately sharing his values. She understands the risks of opening herself, of tying herself to a superhero, but she's still equal partner to Peter. Maybe I'm just not down with the conservative cultural regression in media altogether, but I think it's good for a tween role model to respect three-dimensional women. Like, the nerdy, self-conscious guy can get powers and date a girl who remains staunchly independent. We can tweak her to be more active in the metahuman ecosystem at large, to more directly confront the criminal underworld, to have actually met Peter while she was living next door. But can we do that while letting her flourish as a complicated, imperfect young woman?